How are we doing, everyone? I hope everyone is keeping well, keeping safe. I hope everyone's trading safe as well. Now, today's video, again, a quick little educational video. And basically, what we're going to look at is understanding the overall market structure, but more importantly, understanding why supply or demand actually holds, right? And in this sort of series, in this sort of video, shall I say, I'm going to focus on demand, right? And why the demand chain is actually holding, right? So that's what we're going to look at. And yeah, afterwards, as usual, test it out, see if you like it, see if you can implement it, see if it improves your edge. And if so, use it. If not, don't use it. Okay? So yeah. And before moving on, guys, I should say this. If you have liked the content that's been released here recently, give it a like, give it a share. The likes and stuff goes a long way in terms of the actual YouTube algorithm stuff. And if you've not already done so, subscribe to this channel. So guys, let's use this as an example, right? And I know somebody commented on the last video saying I should stop saying right so much. It used to be okay, now I've changed it to right. So I'll try my best not to say it, but anyway. So this is, let's imagine the higher time frame. Let's just say this is the H4, okay? And what we need to understand here, what's actually happened is we've had a break in market structure, yeah? And we should expect some sort of a pullback before continuation, yeah? Now, where a lot of people get lost is using their intraday time frames or their lower time frames, so to speak. That's where a lot of people get lost. Now, this bit of price action on the higher time frame, although it looks like this, on the lower time frame, we would need to see, well, would more than likely see structure breaks. Yeah. So when we see a structure break here, for example, when we see a structure break here, prices then on that lower time frame going to pull back, mitigate, continue that impulse, pull back, mitigate, continue that impulse, pull back, mitigate, continue that impulse. Now, what's essentially happening here? Yeah, what's essentially happening here? I should maybe extend this out a little further, just so it's a bit more realistic. We might have come into the premium or the EQ of the whole higher time frame leg of price, meaning I'll just make this like, let's say, blue. So we might have come into the 50% of the higher time frame leg of price. At that point, what's actually happened, or what we should expect, or what we should anticipate, is this expectation order flow has now shifted from a pullback, and if we get enough signals from the market saying we're ready to carry on in that next impulse, then this is what's happening. Yeah, and a lot of people sort of miss that fact. What a lot of people see is this chain that's starting to hold, this chain that's starting to hold, this chain that's starting to hold. Yeah, and we're like, okay, demand chain is holding, everything's all well and good, we're gonna go long from here. Now, listen, you could potentially get long from here using a relatively lower time frame and get in and out, but the bigger play, what's going to happen here, depending on how price delivery was, is this. So this demand chain, or the purpose of this demand chain holding in this instance, was to build future liquidity, future calls to target. Yeah, and two ways to sort of understand this, identify this, is always keep an eye out on where you are relative to your higher time frame. Yeah, understand that these demand chains holding is just future liquidity being generated. Yeah, so let's now take a look at a little example here on EU. So let's look at EU. Let's look at a relatively recent example here on EU. Okay, and we had basically this high break this low and put in this new structural low on the H4. Now, what we're expecting after a new low, what we're expecting pullback. Yeah. Now, we've already seen signs here from a H4 standpoint of a bullish change character, suggesting that the pullback is on. Yeah. Now, what we need to identify, or what we need to not fail to identify, essentially, is understand where we're coming into on a higher time frame, because these are two possible regions whereby price could come into and then react, come into and react, and be on its way on that next impulse. Yeah. So we need to look at time. We need to look at confluences and clues based on like a lower time frame to see how price is reacting. Okay. So let's just have these marked out, just so it's clear that these are now within the H4 premium regions. Yeah. So if I just play price out, and this is what I'm going to do, I'm just going to play price out. What do we have? We have, initially, we have a breaking market structure. So we have a single breaking market structure. What does that suggest? A single break suggests intention for price to turn bullish. Yeah. Now we know, right? And when we align our expectation order flow up, we understand that this break essentially has to happen for price to pull back on the higher time frame. Yeah. So this break is of no surprise to us. Then what happens here is price then comes back down, and we come into these sell to buy wicks. Yeah, we get a nice reaction off of it. Now from there, now again, it's all about looking at price and looking at price delivery and understanding clues that price is leaving us. Yeah. So from there, what we can see is we've now started to see this demand chain starting to form. Yeah. Now we've not quite hit. I'll just make this a different sort of shade here, so it's all clear. So we've not quite come into the H4 premium yet, into the H4 levels that we're looking to sell from. But what we can see is future liquidity being built, being generated. That's what we can see. Yeah. Now, from here, what we can also see is we've seen a sweep. There's no breaking market structure there. So if I just keep playing price out, what then happens? We come into this level, and this is the key important bit here. This chain is holding. Now, this is important. We come into this zone here. Now, if you're lost on a lower time frame, some people use an even lower time frame, i.e. the 15 minutes, the 10 minutes, and that's completely fine, but you need to be aware of this. Yeah, you need to be aware of this. Initially, what we had here is we only had a single breaking market structure. We haven't had that closure above. We've not actually had that closure above this high. Yeah, so there's not been a body closure. Now, what else do we have? We have this liquidity that's being generated for future price. Now, if you go on the lower time frame, you can literally extend this demand chain up as such. Yeah, all of this is future liquidity being built up for lower prices, and we're looking at clues. So initial thing that we need to look at here is we've seen this initial breaking market structure, which is fine. We need to see that in order for price to pull back. That is suggesting intention. Secondly, we failed to close above. Right, we're just sweeping liquidity. We're failing to close above. Yeah. Third thing, and I would say the important thing here, is to understand that where we've come into on a higher time frame. So on a H4 standpoint, we've now come into that POI of interest. Yeah, and just look at this liquidity being built to target, because essentially this low here is what we are looking to take. Yeah, so these demand chains that are holding, it's completely fine looking to buy into these regions. But once we get into those regions, understand this is probably going to get useless liquidity. Yeah, so at that point, if you have, let's just say, something in here, yes, you can probably get something out of it using, let's say, a very low time frame, which is fine. I'm not saying that's wrong. But what I'm saying is your real move is probably now this. Yeah, so if I just play price out, what we have is an aggressive mitigation into there, and see how this is now being used as liquidity to target, and off we go. Yeah, and so if I just get onto the H4, what we can see eventually happened was price eventually broke that structure. Yeah, So understand why these demand chains hold. Yeah, understand why they hold. They're not holding. Now, price is not just going to keep doing. So if I just get rid of these, make it a bit more visible. Price is not just going to keep doing this. Yeah, we need to understand this is used. This is going to get used as liquidity at some point, and we need to read price and understand the clues that price is giving us. Price action is giving us, i.e., failure to close above, higher time frames bearish, etc., etc., and put it all into perspective. Put it all into perspective. Yeah. So don't just look at this demand chain holding and be like, okay, we're going to go from here, put in another high, etc., etc. Prices showed us nothing to suggest that we're going to put in another high at this point in time. Yeah. So this should be of no surprise to us. So understand why these demand chains are forming. Yeah. Initially, they're forming to facilitate that pullback. Then eventually, once we mitigate this is likely going to get used as liquidity. Yeah. Now we need to look for signs, of course. Now from here we had that bearish change character, etc., etc. So these are signs that we need to look for to suggest that probably we're going to come target these, and eventually we're going to target the weak H4 low. So guys, that's it for me today. I hope you guys took some sort of value from that. Now, just a little recap here. It's important to understand where you are relative to the higher time frame. Don't ever lose sight of that. Don't ever lose sight of that. Yeah. Secondly, understand the bigger picture in the sense that so in this instance, in this example that we talked about, why is the demand chain holding? Why is it holding? Yeah. So initially, it was to provide that pullback, provide demand for that pullback on the H4. Then it was to target. It was cause for lower prices. Yeah. Thirdly, look for clues that price action leaves behind in order to build your next move. So essentially to build confluence for your trade. Yeah. i.e., failure to close above ETC. Right. I'm not going to go into every single thing that we mentioned. Right. So look for clues, look for things that price is leaving behind. Yeah, and use all of that to build a relatively strong story for the trade that you're taking. So as usual, guys, if you guys have any questions regarding this, just let me know. Reach out to me on Telegram or Instagram, and I'll be for sure to get back to you. I will do another video on this, but based on a supply chain standpoint. Yeah, and because we have seen examples of that on EU relatively recently. So I'll definitely get a video out on that as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the content, and until next time, trade safe.